G'day guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Wildkard. Thank you for watching the Wildkard Rugby Show. This is Wednesday, which means it's time to read some rugby news. First up, as we reported last week, that World Rugby is going to be looking at a bunch of law changes in discussion in May. And one of the law change is going to be potentially the 20-minute red card. There's been a lot of debate about this between the Northern and Southern Hemisphere unions. And obviously down here in the South, we already play with 20-minute red cards all the way up to test levels. And in the North, they have been very resistant to this idea. Now, I want to take this opportunity to look at all the arguments for and the arguments against the 20-minute red card. I want to talk about why I think the 20-minute red card should be the way to go, not just for rugby, but for other similar sports that has red card as well, like soccer, aka football, right? So yeah, let's have a look at some of the arguments against the 20-minute red card as proposed here by Mr. Nigel Owens. Nigel Owens has been, very strongly against the red card for many, many years now. And his main argument against the 20-minute red card is that he thinks that the red card should be a deterrence for egregious, foul plays. And by reducing it down to 20 minutes, it no longer incentivizes the players to change their behavior. Or it's less of an incentive for the players to change their behavior, which, goes into safety, whatnot, and that's the most important thing. The player safety is the most important thing in the game of rugby, right? And he went on to talk about an example that an example of where referees basically hammering down on the tip tackle and recklessly taking play out in the air, and that has resulted in players changing their behavior, as we've seen less and less and less, especially when it comes to the tip tackle, the spear tackle, essentially. Less of that occurring in recent times. And Nigel Owens thinks that is because the referee hammered down on that, and that's why we saw a positive change in players' behavior. But ironically, the example that is given largely changed with the usage of yellow cards. Yeah, so tell me the last time you remember somebody did a spear tackle that was sent off with a red within the last 4 years. I know there was one occurrence to a Tongan player in the Rugby World Cup warm-up match, but I actually haven't seen it because it was like a very small match that it wasn't really broadcasted anywhere. But that's the only one that I know of in the last 4 years where a tip tackle has resulted in a red card. So let me know if you know another occasion that happened, especially at the test level. But yeah, so Nigel Owens has himself proved that the duration of the punishment, a 10-minute yellow card, has already made a change to player behavior. So there's no reason for him to think that a 20-minute red card will not yield the same sort of improvement, the same sort of changes from the player base as he has suggested in his own argument. That's number one. Number two, World Rugby has, specifically emphasized that with the 20-minute red card, they want to shift more of the punishment into the post-match suspensions, which I do agree. I do think that the majority of punishment, the biggest deterrence for player behavior is the off-field punishment. In fact, currently, I think the way that the suspensions are being dealt is completely, completely wrong and completely inconsistent, right? We've seen players that's been getting multiple yellow cards. Owen Farrell, sorry, all right, Owen, right? And then, they get 6 weeks, drop down to 4, and then do the tackle school and drop down to 3. And then a few months later, they get another red. Again, 6 weeks, down to 4, down to 3. That should not be the case, right? It should just be the first one, yes, you get 6 weeks, down to 4, down to 3. The second one should just be straight up 6 weeks. Third one, it should be 10 weeks. And they should just keep going up as you repeat the infringement. And you might be saying, well, okay, how is that going to change a player's behavior? Well, if you're suspended for 10 weeks in a year, the club rugby are going to be thinking twice about re-signing your contract, right? And if your job is on the line, I'm sure your behavior has to be changed. Otherwise, you're going to have to learn how to become a baker or something to find a new job. That should be the deterrence for players not committing to a red card infringement. Not taking them off the field for the entire duration. That should be the biggest deterrence for the players not committing to red card infringements. That's number 2. Number 3, there are some arguments that 20-minute red card would preserve the spectacle of the rugby game. We don't want to see a red card in the Rugby World Cup finals. Ironically, both the women and men's Rugby World Cup final had a red card, and it did cost both those teams the Rugby World Cup. The girls, the Red Rose from England, and the All Blacks from New Zealand, cost them because of the red card to some extent. A lot of people think that shouldn't be the case. The game should be played with 15 players versus 15 players. This point, I actually oppose, because I don't think that just saying that, hey, we want to see a more exciting game of rugby is a sufficient excuse to change the law, because safety should be first and spectacle should come second. So I do think that argument in itself is not sufficient to change the red card to a 20-minute red card. But here's why I think the biggest reason why red card should be changed, and the reason why red card should be looked at for 20 minutes, even for other sports. Because when it comes to sports, it's all about the spirit of fair competition, right? And the biggest part of being the fair competition, and as much as we like to complain about referees making inconsistent decisions, is having the same punishment delivered for the same infringements, right? If you're offside, it's a penalty. It doesn't matter who, what, when, where, why. It's just a penalty. If you drop the ball, it's a scrum. It's the same no matter who commits it, no matter which team commits it, no matter when you commit it. It's always the same. Equal punishment for equal infringement, right? I know, yes, referees are wrong a lot of times, but the fundamental idea of rugby and every sport is the same. Same infringements, same punishment. But when it comes to the red card, it delivers unequal justice to the same infringements. Because the time of your infringement becomes the duration of your punishment. Yes, so, for example, if I went onto the field and I put a high shot on somebody from the kickoff, I'm red carded for 79 minutes of the match. Whereas the same exact high shot from the kickoff in the second half will only result in a 39-minute suspension. Same punishment, same infringement, unequal justice. And that is not in the spirit of a fair competition of any sport. There's no other law in rugby that says if you commit a knock on in the first half, it's only a scrum. If you commit a knock on in the second half, it's a full-on penalty. There's no such thing. It's always the same. And why is the red card delivering unequal justice for same infringement? That is why I think the main reason why I think the red card should be 20 minutes. So that it's equal punishment for the equal infringement, for the same infringement. And also there's a last one issue, small tiny bit of issue as well. Sometimes you can get a red card for giving 2 yellow cards. And that could just, like we saw Scotty Barrett got a red card for getting 2 yellow cards. And that is because his team got a repeated penalty warning from the referee, and he just happened to be on the receiving end of both the yellow cards, and that turned into a red card. And again, the occurrences of this is really matters at that point, right? If 2 yellow cards were issued out to the same player in the first half, it's not the same punishment if the 2 yellow cards were issued out to Scotty Barrett in the second half. But that's basically the same crime as well. In fact, that's basically just unlucky to Scotty Barrett. And his team is put into a massive detriment because of it, right? So that's something else to think as well. And I think that equal justice needs to be done for the same crime. It's very, very, very important in the game of rugby, in any sport. So that is my reasoning. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Also, and one last point as well. the threshold for the red cards has gone through the roof as well. So you can see that, back in the days, Skogberger could guy gouge someone, steal a yellow card. So nowadays, with the more and more likelihood you're going to get a red card, I think that, one of the reasons that red card hasn't really been talked about for a very long time, because it just wasn't given out. It was never given out for like, you have to really do some really, really, really egregious stuff, and it's still a yellow card. So it's very, very hard in the past to get a red card, and now it's becoming more and more relevant. And you can't just say, oh, this has always been the case. Historically, red card, you get sent off, because historically, you don't even get a red card for a lot of the things that you're gonna get a red card nowadays, right? And this is the biggest example as well. I gouged Skogberger, no red card, just a yellow at the Lions tour. And also, there was another thing about the TMO, and again, they want to speed up the TMO, make the TMO less involved in decision making. Something that I forgot to talk about last week, and there was an issue, in fact, this week in the Premiership where Owen Farrell was allegedly, hit on the ground with a knee, as a player sliding on the ground and hit Owen Farrell with a knee, and the TMO didn't go back and look at it. And something that, as much as people like the game to be sped up and not having TMO taking time on wasting too much time, but I do think that you don't want fans and players to be discussing this after the game as well. I do think it's better to have this sorted out during the game, just for the peace of mind for everybody, just for at least for the clarity. And something that, again, the TMO, how they should function, is another thing they're going to be looking at in this meeting. Now, the golden point is another thing that's being talked about more specifically down here in Super Rugby. So the Fijian and Druas has beaten the Waratahs for the first time, in ever, by golden point in extra time. And this is something that the panels, the rugby panels, Morgan Turanui in the rugby, Stan Sport. This is what do they call it, like a rugby show. Basically, they talked about why they think that maybe the golden point rule should be removed. The panels didn't actually give a sufficient reasoning for this. Morgan Turanui basically said that both teams deserved it to get the draw points. The Waratahs don't deserve to walk away with after that huge effort, didn't deserve to walk away with a loss and no points essentially. But I kind of disagree with Morgan Turanui here, because it's funny, because the whole reason they introduced the golden point is because Rugby League introduced the golden point, and Rugby League is considering removing that. Now suddenly Rugby Union's like, we don't agree, we want to remove that as well. Again, he actually talked about Rugby League, mentioned Rugby League as well in his discussion, which I strongly disagree as the reasoning why golden points should be removed. First of all, I think golden points should be added to all Test Rugby as well, not just Super Rugby, because the worst feeling for a fan is a draw. You can tell me how you felt after the draw in the Land of the Lions tour in 2017 with New Zealand. It's the worst feeling in the world. The last Bloodless World Cup I went to was a draw. And I can tell you, it was like attending a funeral. Not a single person was cheering. Dead silence around the stadium. Everybody was just marching out with heads hanging down like somebody had died. It was the most depressing feeling in the world when it's a draw. So for the fans' perspective, in fact for me, I'd rather a loss than a draw, because at least I can feel some emotions, right? Get some emotion about it. When it's a draw, it's just, nothing. You feel nothing. It's just like, almost feel like a waste of time. So I definitely don't want to see a draw. And ironically, the arguments for Rugby League does not apply to what Morgan Turanui was talking about for Rugby Union, despite the fact that they copied this from Rugby League. Because in Rugby League, the point scoring system is for two reasons. The point scoring system, I think the biggest reason is the point scoring system for Rugby League is different. You get only 2 points by winning a game. There's no bonus point in Rugby League. So you win a game, you get 2 points. It's a draw, everybody get 1 point. So in Rugby League, when a team wins the game by a golden point, they are literally denying the other team any sort of points out of that game. Whereas in Rugby Union, that's actually not the case. You lose the game, you still get the points for losing within 7. And in the case of like Six Nations, right? If you score 4 tries, then you get the extra bonus. You get the bonus point for 4 tries. So you can actually walk on with 2 points for a draw. For a loss in golden time, golden points, right? Because you lost the game by less than 7, and if you score 4 tries, that's for the Six Nations. But for the rugby, for the Super Rugby, you don't get bonus points for scoring 4 tries. You only get bonus points for beating the other team by more than 3 tries, which I think should be changed to 4 tries or 3 tries even. You just get bonus point for 3 tries to incentivize teams to play more tries. And that means even in the current state of Super Rugby, you still get 1 point for losing by less than 7. So you don't walk away with nothing. So the argument that Rugby League has been proposing, which is a team don't deserve to just walk away with nothing after such a spectacular performance, that doesn't actually apply to rugby union. And I do think that the most importantly, nobody wants to see a draw. That is a fact. And it's just really takes the game into another level in the bonus point, in the golden point section. And there was also another argument about how the referee becomes a bigger role. So what? You're gonna play this in the Rugby World Cup anyway. So it's good practice, and it's good practice, and it's something that exciting. It doesn't matter what you say about the referee. It's still exciting. It's still something different. It's still something that the fans wants to see. Not like a draw. And a lot of the argument from the Rugby League side just do not apply because of the bonus point system that is in play for rugby union. So that's a bit of an interesting discussion there as well. How the golden points should be conducted. So yeah, Fijian Drua coach came out with a bit of a Chicago Bulls had, because the first year when the Druas lost to the Waratahs, the head coach Darren Coleman came out and basically said, we didn't beat the Chicago Bulls or anything. It's not a big deal. So the Druas, after they won today, had a bit of a laugh about the Chicago Bulls comment in that regard. Next up, let's move on to, so yes, the Newcastle Falcons has had a bit of a whinge on the weekend about after they lost to the Scrum Mauls. So the Falcons consultant director of rugby, Steve Diamond's coming on and suggests the ban to the rugby Maul because, oh my god, we lost because of the Maul, man. And whilst the club is in rugby, and this is the same club that's looking at getting money from Saudi, oh yes, let's take money from, the regime that murders, what do they call it? Reporters, that murders, reporters, and, and complain about losing the game to scrummaging. To Mauls. Yeah, great showing there by the Newcastle Falcons, especially when their own women's team is like the best team in the world at doing the rolling Maul, right? It's like, yeah, screw the girls, right? In England, we don't care about women's rugby. We just care about our financial standings. We care about money from Saudi Arabia, right? And we want the Maul banned because it makes more sense to us, right? It's actually disgraceful how just disgraceful these comments coming out of some of these people from England. Anyway, moving on. Next up, we're going to talk about the Crusaders. We're going to talk about the current state of New Zealand rugby, and this is it's a big weekend of rugby from Super out of New Zealand. Again, the Blues has beaten the Crusaders for the first time in like 10 years at Eden Park or something, and the Crusaders for the first time in its history has lost 5 games in a row. They have never lost more than 3, and then it's already at 5 this week. And next week they're going up against the Chiefs, and it's not looking good. There could be 6 losses in a row for the Crusaders. With that being said, the one thing that I don't understand for the Crusaders, why do they put Rob Penny in charge of the Crusaders? I mean, he was sacked, right, by the Waratahs for being one of the worst Waratahs coach in Australia. Why do the Crusaders think that they're going to bring in a failed coach for the Waratahs and that's going to carry on the Crusaders' legacy? What is the thoughts behind that? Like, what is going on here in in at the Crusaders. But that is already something that I still don't understand. But yeah, Crusaders looking at some big issues. They are going to have to go up against the Chiefs again. One of the biggest players, David Havili, is going to be resting for a historical match that's potentially going to see them being the worst Crusaders team like ever by a long yard, right? And they somehow decide to rest David Havili. Again, I'm pretty sure this is probably to do with All Blacks resting protocols. And again, if the game is struggling, why do you have these protocols for your All Blacks players? You have a bye round that's coming up next week. So Havili is going to get 2 weeks off. I mean, it just blows my mind how they decide on these sort of things. And why Rob Penny is the head coach, I don't know. I honestly can't tell you. And with that being said, there's an even bigger issue out of New Zealand rugby. The pipeline from New Zealand rugby is drying up, man. Like, the Fergus book is looking at moving to replace Owen Farrell in at the Saracens. And, like, the Crusaders are not even, like, he's not even, like, at the top tier fly half out of New Zealand rugby right now. Like, and they're leaving overseas. What is going on in New Zealand rugby, man? And this has all got even worse when Razor Robertson has reported last week that he has spoken to Sam Wylock for potential return. What? Sam Wylock? Yes, the 36 now, is he? 35-year-old? To return to play for the All Blacks again this year because they're just running out of people in the pipeline in New Zealand rugby right now. And then there was more bad news for New Zealand rugby last week that the national provincial rugby championship coverage on TV, it's going to get potentially cold in 2026. Didn't they just hand them like what, millions of dollars to these unions, provincial rugby unions? How much did they give them? 14 million in total. I don't think it didn't give out 14 million for each. They handed out 14 million in total to the unions. And it's like every union got like $2 million each or something. So like they just handed them out a lot of money from the Silver Lake investment, and they took that money instead of building the NPC back up. They decided to cut it. It's gonna get cut. So where did the money go for New Zealand rugby? Where did all these millions of dollars go that was given to these provincial unions after the Silver Lake deal? New Zealand rugby is in really big trouble here. I mean, what is going on here? And obviously the Chiefs, again, Damian McKenzie is going to be resting, All Blacks protocol. Like, why would you have these big matches where your superstars that everybody wants to see taking a break? This is like the one game you shouldn't be taking a break. It's like resting someone, I don't know, like it is like the biggest rival match, in New Zealand, and you're taking a break for these players. What's going on? Like, this just really bad management. But anyway, Damian McKenzie, though, to be fair, I think he probably needed a bit of a break. He looked like he was on shaky grounds for a couple of weeks now. He looked like he's had legs heavily strapped, so he probably need a break. But still, like, what is the idea of that? And then the Chiefs has decided to debut Josh Jacob in the 10 jersey instead of starting Josh Ioane. So maybe they want to give the Crusader a little breather and hand them a free win this weekend. So yeah, New Zealand rugby in some big problems. Let's move on to South Africa. Eben Nesbeth has returned from surgery to the Sharks. I think I've already talked about this last week. Moving on. Matthew Renaud, the greatest French referee ever, has announced his retirement. Probably because he can't get a visa to work in Australia anymore. So, which, really hinders his ability to become to work as an international test referee if you can't get visas to come to Australia. So yeah, I think that's probably why he announced his retirement at the age of 42. So yeah, Matthew Renaud has retired because he can't get visas to come to Australia. Next up, Danny Kerr has retired after 101 test matches. Willem Nel has also announced his retirement due to his body no longer being able to handle the rigorous demands of professional rugby. He's 37 years of age, and I felt like he probably should have retired a couple of years ago now. I mean, Scotland has been really thin on the prop area. If they had a bit more talent, he probably would have been out a couple of years ago already. Speaking of big props, oh boy, Tanela Tupou is being discussed in a number of different teams in Europe right now. Montpellier and Leicester are both looking at making him an offer. He's currently at the Rebels, who's probably going bankrupt. So Rugby Australia really needs to open up the checkbook to try to keep Tanela Tupou playing in Australia. Yeah. And then next up, Rugby Australia did make the right decision last week to keep Max Jorgensen, keep him signed up to 2026, which is someone that was talking about going to Rugby League as of last week. So that's good that Rugby Australia has locked him down. Next up, James Slipper will equal in all-time Super Rugby appearances, 177 test matches to his former teammate, Stephen Maul. And next up, Georgia has issued a challenge to Wales after Wales received the wooden spoon, because Georgia did beat Wales last year in the November Test series. I think it was July Test series. They did beat Wales there, and Georgia is also the top ranked team in the European Championship. What do they call it? Yeah, European Championship competition. I also wanted to see potentially Portugal maybe can play against Wales as well. So Portugal is second runner up, but Georgia will be really, there was some talks about potentially having like a relegation game between the two competitions, but Georgia is kind of like trying to throw that idea out there once again that they can indeed topple the bottom team and potentially make themselves into the Six Nations. And finally, in the inaugural Rugby Championship under 20s has been announced for May this year, so just in about a month or so away, and about time the under 20s tournament kicked off for the Southern Hemisphere. The Northerners have that ongoing now for a couple of years now, at least I think, and finally the Southern Hemisphere is catching up for that idea. They had a Six Nations under 20s, so now they're doing the Six Nations, the Rugby Championship under 20s as a counterpart. Yeah, thanks for watching this video, guys. Let me know your thoughts about the 20-minute red card. Thanks to anyone who supports me financially. Check out the merch store, like, comment, subscribe. Have a good week, and I'll see you guys later this week for Super Rugby reviews. Cheers.